Hello everybody, this is Richard coming to you from the Terraform Homestead. For those of you who are new to our channel, I bought off-grid, uninhabited property a little over 3.5 years ago and have been working to build a fully sustainable off-grid homestead in southern Arizona. Today, what I want to do is run you through 5 things that I think most people don't think about when they're considering buying rural or off-grid land to homestead on. These are 5 things that I think most people don't really take into consideration and can really make or break your off-grid homesteading success in the long run. Let's get into it. If you guys stick around to the end, I'll give you guys a bonus tip that I think is really, really important to your success as an off-grid homesteader. First thing I would consider when I'm looking for land is what are my necessities and how far away are they? Necessities come in a bunch of different forms. Obviously, there is grocery store, hardware store, that kind of stuff, but I would also seriously look into hospital, how accessible is a medical facility where you are. If you get hurt, are you able to get to a medical facility in a timely manner? That is something that was really important to me. Another important thing for me is international travel. So we're about an hour and a half from Tucson, which means there is an international airport there. I was able to find a place that was accessible enough to a major city. That's also super helpful with finding deals on supplies and building materials and things like that. So just kind of considering, how far away from you are grocery stores, our hardware stores, our hospital, airports, things like that. Even like a 30-minute drive for me seems like a really, really long drive to get to town these days. But at least I'm not like an hour and a half, 2 hours away where it's a full day to go to town. I think the other thing to consider when you're thinking about necessities is what are the cultural things around you? I picked where we are specifically because of Bisbee, Arizona. So we're about 30 minutes away from Bisbee, which is a super fun, artsy music town. They have live music coming through regularly, festivals, things like that. If you're considering going off-grid and you're single, think about that. If you are looking to date, living off-grid in a tent or an RV, an hour and a half from the nearest town kind of limits your options. So if that is something that is important to you, finding something that is closer to a major city may be worth looking into. I know in southern Arizona, we have places that are 45 minutes from Tucson that are still in Cochise County, rural, off-grid, homestead accessible, and then you still have kind of that luxury of the big city life. I love where we are. We're about 30 minutes from Sierra Vista, which is my grocery runs, my hardware store runs, all that kind of stuff. About 30 minutes from Bisbee, which is kind of all my cultural, music, entertainment, going out with people sort of thing. And for me, that works really well. For you, you may want to be 2 hours from somebody else, but just kind of think that into consideration when you're kind of going through your first step of where do I want to live. I think the second thing I would consider when you're looking for land is how close are you to big agricultural fields? And the reason behind this is those fields put off tons of pesticides and you never know what they're using. So in my experience, I lived out in Slav City for about 3 weeks once upon a time, and that area is just so nasty with the old military stuff, the Salton Sea, and the agricultural just pesticides that are flying through the air. And even 3 weeks there, I got really sick. And so I would not even consider living within like 10 or 15 miles of a big monocrop agricultural field, because those pesticides and stuff are going to get kicked up into the wind. And I think the best way to kind of look is through Google Satellite View. So if you are clicking through, find some properties that you like or find an area that you like, go on Google Maps and hit that satellite view and kind of just scroll around and look, and you'll be able to see really easily those big agricultural fields. And at least in my opinion, I would stay far, far, far away from those. When I was looking for land, there was a lot of land very, very cheap, very near those fields, but there's a reason it's cheap, and in my opinion, it's because it's a bunch of toxic pesticides. So I would look for someplace far away from any kind of agricultural stuff, any kind of major mining, anything that's going to be super environmentally destructive that may get picked up in the air, get picked up in the water, and end up impacting your homestead. The third thing I would consider, and this is especially important in my situation where we are in the southern Arizona desert, is water access. And that kind of comes in two ways. So definitely consider how deep is your water table if you're going to possibly be on well water or drill for a well. Where we are, it was like 700 feet down, something crazy. The quotes that a neighbor got was around $30,000 to $50,000, and that's no guarantee that they're going to hit water. Also, kind of back to the first point of the agricultural stuff, Arizona does not regulate agricultural water pull very well, and so a lot of the big fields are draining our aquifers really, really quickly, which is very concerning. So for me, a well was not an option here, so therefore I kind of looked into, okay, how am I going to get water? And how much does it cost to have water delivered? Where we are, it's about $350 to have 4,000 gallons delivered. We don't do a lot of planting and farming and stuff like that out here, so that can last quite a long time. We are also in a very wet desert, and so basically we can collect a lot of rainwater, and that was definitely a huge, huge thing for me to choose where we are specifically, was because I wanted to live fully on rainwater eventually. And 3 years in, this point, we're about halfway to that goal. So definitely consider where you're getting your water. And some places that may not be as important, but especially if you're looking in the desert, consider that water table. I think the easiest way to figure this stuff out is just Google some well drilling companies in your area and just ask, like, hey, how deep are you finding the wells situation is? How much does that cost? You know, Facebook groups are really, really good at finding people that can deliver water, and just ask, like, hey, who delivers water out here, and do you guys have a rough cost per gallon sort of thing? Definitely tip number 3, consider where you're getting your water from. The fourth tip I would give you guys is consider your cost of living and the building materials where you're looking to build. So most people want to move off grid, homestead, because they want to live a very frugal, simple, cheap life. Maybe you want to retire early. That's kind of my situation. You know, own your home outright, own your land outright, so you're not constantly paying rent and mortgage and heavy taxes and stuff like that. But depending on where you're looking to move is going to determine, 1, how you build, and 2, what the cost of those buildings are. So where we are in the desert, the best form of building is natural building, earth bag building, you know, stuff like that, where the material cost is very, very inexpensive, but the labor that goes into it is extremely, extremely strenuous and extremely high. So for me, I'm doing a lot of the work myself. This is something I enjoy, so that works out for me. But you know, it may not work out for you. Lumber is very, very expensive out in southern Arizona because we don't have big forests and trees and stuff like that. Versus if you're looking, say, in the Pacific Northwest, you may do kind of a log cabin build because that's what you have accessible. Earth bag buildings don't do super well in the wet weather. And just consider that. Is where you're building, what works there, something you want to do? Simple as that. Is it something you want to do, and can you afford it? Obviously, if you get a big metal building, that's going to work in most places, but that's going to be very expensive. Is that in your budget? You know, kind of depends on what you want to do. The 5th tip I have for you guys, and I think this is extremely, extremely important, is talking to the zoning and planning people. and figuring out what permitting looks like, what is required of your property. We're in Cochise County, where they have their owner-builder opt-out, and that was a huge, probably the number one reason I moved here. Because for me, I'm a long-term tiny house dweller. I wanted to continue to live in my tiny house legally. I did not want to be fighting with the county and the zoning and the planning and blah, 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 because I had an owner-built house. And so Cochise County let us do what they call their owner-builder opt-out. So it was legal for me to build this shop we're in, my house, the hyper adobe house that we're working on right now, without having to go through a lot of inspections and hire general contractors and things like that. So that worked out really well for me. Figuring out exactly what those rules are very important, because we do have friends that knew about the owner builder opt-out, was super excited to build an earthbag home, bought property fairly close to town, and then found out that they were not zoned as a rural property, and therefore they could not do the owner builder opt-out. They only had 2.5 acres, whereas you needed 4 acres or more to qualify for that owner builder opt-out. So they had to go through the traditional building permit system. It's a lot more of a headache, and they probably would have rather have just bought an extra 2 acres somewhere outside of town a little bit more to be able to kind of have that freedom and flexibility to do what they want. So making sure that you are friends with the planning and zoning committee of your county. Most of them, especially here locally, have been super helpful, super kind, and are willing to kind of talk. If you're just like, hey, I'm looking to move to the area, can I schedule some time with you? This is kind of what I want to do. What does that entail? What is those permitting fees? How long do I have to build? Who do I got to contact? Figuring that out before you kind of start looking at a location is really important. If I go an hour north of here, I'm in a totally different county that would not let me do what I'm doing here. So it's a county by county thing. Find where you want to go, call the zoning people, make friends with them, make an appointment, and just kind of talk their ear off and ask as many questions as possible, because that will make or break where you're going to live. So finally, the bonus tip, and this is, in my opinion, like the most important thing, is, are there people around where you're looking that are doing what you want to do? So where I am in Bisbee, Arizona, it is a mecca for creatives and artistic people and people doing weird, crazy, fun off-grid homes and things like that. The Cochise County opt-out is an amazing opportunity to be able to do whatever you wanted to do. If you came into a place and you wanted to do something and no one's ever done it before, you're probably going to have some struggles. And finding that little niche in your world where there are other people that are doing like-minded things, not only are you going to get away with more from a legal standpoint because other people have kind of paved the way, but also you're going to have that community of people that are doing like-minded things and want to kind of help each other out and build a better community, hopefully. I love kind of our homesteading opt-out, off-grid community here. It is a tight-knit group of people, and they all kind of help each other out, know what each other's doing. Different people have different skill sets, which is amazing because, finding a contractor out here is not super easy. So being able to have a buddy that knows XYZ and this thing that they need, and being able to swap and barter and trade, that's something that is super, super helpful. So finding your community, I think, is the most important thing, and finding your cultural fit. Again, for me, being a crazy artist builder, Bisbee was an amazing community, but Tombstone, which is just 30 minutes in the other direction, it's a nice place. I enjoy going there and visiting every once in a while, but it's a much more conservative kind of, and so it's not necessarily my niche that I fit into super well. Finding that artsy community was the fit for me, whereas other people, Tombstone is a great opportunity too, or wherever you're looking. So being able to find people that are doing what you're doing what you want to do, and that fit kind of your cultural vibe, I think is probably the most important thing to look at. And that may come figuring that out with living in a place for a little bit. It's okay to rent a property. That's what I did. I rented a place for a month in Bisbee while looking for land to make sure it was a good fit, because this is your life and a big commitment to get into, so you want to make sure you're doing it right. So I hope those tips were helpful. If you guys enjoyed this sort of content, this is a new format for me and our channel, and I would love to provide some more information and just kind of help more people get off grid. You know, when I started 3.5 years ago, there wasn't a road to get here, and I kind of did everything the hard way. So if I can kind of imbue a little bit of knowledge on you to make your journey a little bit easier, that makes me super happy, and you know, I would love to do that more. Please leave a comment, let me know what you want to do. I'm hoping to put out more videos like this in the future. Thank you guys for watching. Go build something cool.
Sign that said